Okay, we will call the January 13th Budget Committee meeting to order. Take it away, Nick.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. First up on our agenda today is portable and mobile radios. As you may recall, during the 2022 budget cycle, while we were planning this out, the Sheriff's Office did come to us asking for $1 million worth of funding to purchase radios. During the conversations for the budget, we did elect to get into a rotation cycle, providing $250,000 of annual funding to replace radios over the course of the next 4 to 5 years, depending on what pricing did. But the Sheriff has since then gotten some feedback that the contract with the state of Minnesota for radios expires January 31st, 2022, with a new contract coming out February 1st. Our vendor did suggest that there may be a 20 to 25% price increase. Later came saying a 10 to 25% price increase. So there is some risk that if we do delay the purchase of these items, that they we'll see increased costs over the course of the next 5 years as we do this replacement cycle. The decision tree, this form here that has all the information on it, starting out, the current bid is for $911,708.40. This is for all of the radios that the Sheriff's Department needs. I believe jail as well.
It's all of our functions, yeah.
So all the functions, it does exclude highway. I did have a conversation with highway. Highway is electing to stay out of this conversation. They will replace these radios as they fail on their end. So there were a few different options that Sheriff's Office did propose. Obviously, option one is our current situation where we have 250 set out every single year to start a replacement cycle. There is the listing here of the 10%, 15%, 20% increase is the anticipated increase to that quote based on what our vendor has told us so far. The number underneath that, the $91,170 and going across, is the difference of the projected bid versus the current bid. One thing to keep in mind is this is a little artificially inflated. This is for the total of the contract. If we don't elect to buy them up front and we stay on the current plan we are on, we will buy 1/4 of them before the expiration of this contract. Pardon me. So you can take about 1/4 of that cost off in that variance. Some of the pros of this is it's a quicker path to our annual replacement cycle. We did set out with a plan to replace radios on a cycle going forward in a 4 to 5 year time frame. Research shows that the radios have about a 5 to 7 year estimated useful life. That doesn't mean that they all fail after 5 to 7 years, but that is their estimated useful life as a whole. Some of the cons of this is it does have the added cost. We'll see that spread out over the course of the next 4 to 5 years. Every budget cycle will have to increase that 250 slightly to accommodate that. It also has us having radios that will be 15 years old prior to them truly being replaced. So those are our cons on that aspect. The Sheriff's Office did also reach out to the vendor, and there is a leasing option for us. The lease option is a lease to purchase. So once the lease contract is up, we will own the radios outright. That does come with a 2.99% lease interest rate. It does allow us to stay under our budget, so we'll be spending about $50,000 less than what we anticipated. It spreads that cost out over the 5 years and allows us to buy the radios up front. It does come with additional cost, $84,000 for financing costs over the course of those 4 to 5 years, as well as it doesn't get us to that 5-year replacement cycle as quickly as staying on the current path does. We will only have 10-year-old radios this round, but the next round of radios, by the time we get done with the lease and then get into that rotation cycle, we'll end up with about 9-year-old radios before everything is into the actual cycle. One of the other options is Arpa Funds. With the new guidance that we got from Treasury, the radios do now qualify for the use of Arpa funds. It would allow us to buy it all up front. Our recommendation from finance would be that you would then reduce the budget for Sheriff's Office by the $250 and leave that out of the picture until we get back to that replacement cycle. So the advantages are that full replacement, and it allows us to take advantage of the current pricing. The disadvantages to this is it does extend that time frame to get to that replacement cycle. It does add additional reporting requirements. This will have to be treated as a project under ARPA, and it will have to go through the same reporting requirements that all other projects on ARPA will have to go through, which is fairly extensive. And it also, again, doesn't allow us to get to that 5-year replacement cycle within the next 4 to 5 years. It takes us 9 years before we get through that whole replacement cycle. I'll let Scott talk a little bit about what he sees from this, but from finance's perspective, we are 13 days into the budget. Our recommendation is we kind of stay on our current path. We did anticipate that over the course of time, with inflation, that cost would go up. So we would every year look at this budget line item and determine what is the next amount that we need to have to allow us to replace those radios on that cycle. So Scott, if you have anything?
Yeah, so just a couple of things. The 250 that were budgeted for this year, for 2022, that was, well, Nick is correct in that agreement. As for a 4 or 5 year replacement cycle being agreed to, I guess I would say no. I've been very clear that the radios we've got are already 12 years old. Life expectancy, we're double already. And we're basically doubling that again if we go another 3 or 4 years, 5 years out on what we have currently. Our goal is to make sure that our radios are working. They're not supported by Motorola. If and when they break, they're basically, well, you can use them for I can send them as Christmas presents because they would be no good. I mean, we use them as a doorstop, paper magnet, whatever you want to do with them, but they're no good. It's getting to the point now that even simple things such as batteries are becoming an issue to purchase. You know, this isn't something we can just go to, we can go to Batteries Plus or any hardware store and pick up a battery for. So the 250,000, and we have broken out, Dan's got a little bit more information if you'd like to see it. We've broken out what that first 250 that we're budgeted for this year, what we're going to cover, and it's basically going to be patrol functions for our portable radios. We can make this work, folks, and I'll be completely upfront with that, but I don't see us on a 4 or 5 year rotation plan with the radios we have in our hands right now. As we progress, and once we get these all replaced, I can see us easily, and one of the easiest solutions that we came up with for a replacement schedule was basically following our squad car replacement schedules. When they come up, the squad cars come up, the radios, both in the squad car itself and the handheld radio, would basically be on that cycle at the same time. I think that's an easy fix for the future, but right now my concern is I don't see us having a life expectancy with the radios we have and not being supported to make it through this process of going that many years out. I like the idea that the ARPA money is finally, you know, there's some of the restrictions have been pulled off of it, but I know there's going to be a lot of, I'm guessing, additional questions are asked for that now that they're, you know, kind of thing has been dialed back on that. I'm just looking for some guidance from all of you of saying where, you know, what is your comfort level? My steadfast is we need radios, and it can't be on a 4 or 5 year cycle. It's the comfort zone of how much, you know, do we want to pay now versus what we could savings. It's significant enough savings that I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention, because in the far worst case scenario, Nick, we're still looking at upwards of could be $100,000. Increase, and this is going to take place when the contract starts over again. February, Dan, can you help me out? February 1, sorry. So, I mean, that's kind of the immediacy with it. We already know that we're going to spend our $250,000. We're going to get our portables. I'm just looking for guidance from you of what your comfort level is on which route we should do to get there.
I've got a question for the sheriff. So, Sheriff, does every deputy have a county-issued cell phone also?
County issue? Yes.
Because I've seen a lot of times when there's some sensitive chatter, they don't chat over the radios, they call on the cell phone. Isn't that correct?
That is true. We've also got the encrypted channels on our radio. So it's kind of, I completely agree, Paul. You know, there's a lot of conversations we have by cell phone, if it's a one-to-one basis. If it's more than a one-to-one basis, then I would say it's radio communication. But it's also depending on the immediacy too. There's a lot of instances where we have the luxury of having time to make a phone call. Other times, as everyone can imagine, we don't have time to even think on our feet quite often. So it's nothing that we can't do.
One other thing is, you know, I understand where you're coming from. You know, this is law enforcement. Yeah, when we call 911, we want somebody to show up at our door to help us, whether it's a crime or whether it's a heart attack or whatever. But I think, and I understand, you got a tough job, but the county board, in my mind, has a tough job of trying to balance that right recipe on, you know, how do we pay for all these things, you know, keep the roads plowed, keep social services, community services going. I mean, it's kind of a delicate balancing act. And, you know, you know, I mean, the radios are extremely important, but, you know, there's a lot of other things that you have there that are important too. And then, you know, what happens when you come next time and say, hey, we need some new flak jackets. These are really important. Well, yeah, they are extremely important. I guess but let's have a little more discussion. I guess I got to roll this around in my head about what I think would be the right way to go.
Well, Paul,
so Sheriff, tell me again, what's your preference?
Well, so Paul, and to go back to your last statement, that's exactly why I'm here. You know, we've got a number of routes we can go. One, the way I look at it, if you talk about money, would save over $100,000 if we buy them all before February 1st. The other one's going to spend more than $100,000. We buy them in the future. So that is exactly why I'm here and looking for the guidance from you. You know, when we went into this year knowing we're going to have 250,000, I mentioned to both Nick and Tim Hool that a 4 or 5 year replacement schedule simply will not work. But that's for discussions in the future. At the time, there were so many unknowns with what we could see for the Arpa money, as an example, what we could find for funding, et cetera. I think that the definition, or I guess the guidance reference to ARPA, has been rewritten, as we all know. So there's, you know, some more variable or more options there. But my discussion today is exactly to your point, Paul. Is what is the commissioner's hesitancy, or what is their preference of where they're happy with? You know, do we maybe buy half this year, and we've got them all itemized out? Do we buy half of what we need this year and save the county $50,000 over the next few years, or do we do nothing and cost more? And would that money be better suited as availability for other options? That's exactly what why I brought this topic forward and trying to figure out an answer for.
The only thing is if the life expectancy is, let's just say hypothetically it's 5 years. What we could do, okay, let's say we bought them all now, and yes, we saved $100,000, but we know everything's going up, so that's a given. But what are we going to do for the next 5 years? Then, if that's if we're going to have to replace them all in 5 years, then to me we got to be setting aside money every year that's earmarked for this replacement, so that we don't have a big $1 million bill at the end of 5 years. Somehow in my mind, we gotta plan every year to set some money aside so that we know that in 5 or 6 or whatever amount of time it is that we can replace these radios again, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, it does.
The savings that you're quoting is based on the expectation or the expected increase of what the increase is going to be, correct? We're saying we're going to save, quote, $100,000 because we expect that next year the price is going to go up 20%. We're basing that on that assumption.
Assumption, yes, but I would use the word assumptions, yeah.
Sorry, I should have done that.
Yeah.
The last contract that actually with the state of Minnesota was back in February 1st of 2017. So this price has stayed stagnant since 2017. So you know that, I don't know, I think the 10% is probably on the low side, 20%, I think 15 to 20% is probably more reality at that point.
Contract expires February 1st, but we haven't gotten new contract pricing yet?
Correct, yeah, the contract pricing, I think they just kind of, from what our vendor said, is that it's still in negotiations.
That is fairly common for the state, that you don't know the actual pricing of the contract until the contract is out.
Nick, you said that
That
within,
kind of reminds me when I was milking cows, my feed salesman would come by and he'd say, "Oh, Paul, soybeans are going to go up. You better stock up now." So like a dummy, I'd stock up. They never went up. Sometimes that's a ploy by these salesmen to, they get everybody all wound up. Oh God, it's going up 25%. And it doesn't.
I agree with you, Paul, except for look at where we're at right now, with not only the idea of seeing everything go up, but what can we get and how can we get it? And that's another thing with any electronics. These are highly, they are a computer in themselves. That's one of our concern also, is if we order them, when are we going to see them? We haven't got an answer of that either. It's the nature of the beast that we live in. It's somewhat of a gamble, I would say. In this case, Nick, Dan, John, I think we've all do our due diligence to at least say, here's our best educated guess on what it's going to look like. But to back up what Debbie said, yes, and it's an assumption. And we could end up having a pile of soybeans we don't need. I don't think that's going to be the case.
now Nick, you said that after, this year, we'll have a quarter of our radios replaced, correct?
Approximately.
In 2 years, we'll have half of them replaced.
Approximately.
Part of the problem that we're in here and faced with having to look at this big decision, because 900,000 is a big number, we never put in place a plan like this that we're going to have automatic replacement. So we have to do it sometime.
Right, and that's how we got to this point of that 4 to 5 year replacement cycle, and Sheriff is right. The first 4 to 5 years, we're gonna have very old radios that'll still be in use before we get there. The reason we went down that path is, like he said, it is a computer in itself. We wanted to treat this much more like we do our PCs, move this to an operational cost, and have that on that replacement cycle so that we are replacing them regularly.
Nick, what has been the process for replacement? How have we done it in the past?
One lump sum purchase.
So back in,
When we went with 800 megahertz, remember, some of us were around for the Armor radio systems, the 800 megahertz, that's when every radio entity purchased radios. Some other agencies have updated since, police departments, et cetera. John was just up programming radios the other day for one of the police departments for new ones that they've purchased. So some have upgraded, some are still running with what we've got, a number of the fire departments. If you remember right, we did one bulk purchase basically for all entities. And a lot of this conversation was the same back then too, because we were looking at what were the savings going to be going Route A versus what were the savings going to be going Route B. So there was a lot of similarities. But in my lifespan, I've had 3 radios as an officer here. My first one had 3 channels, only 2 of which were programmed in. It would stop a nuclear weapon. It was about the size of an egg carton and about as thick as an egg carton with no holder. It wouldn't fit in my pocket and there was no holder. That was my first radio. My second radio was an MT-1000, was the best radio I think we've ever had, but that was the old VHF technology that we went away from. And then now we're on to our third cycle. And unfortunately, the technology, I mean, literally going from being run by a computer program, computer chip, to the old system of relays, switches, and whatever else they have in there, light bulbs and soybeans, we are to the point now where the replacement we're going to see is going to be in that 3 to 5, 7 year window, not what we've been able to get through before, which was basically, 12 plus years on the radio that I have right now, so.
any other, Rosemary?
Well, I have a question, and I don't know who it's for, actually. Is there any way we can get an extension on this contract? Because I agree with Paul we don't know whether things are really going to go up as much as, or whether they're not going to. So in order to do this and make the best decision and the right decision, we really need to know what the contract pricing is.
Purchasing through the state of Minnesota, we are beholden to whatever the state negotiates. And when that contract expires, the state is done with that contract. So we're,
They will not give an extension.
right.
It's
Might
similar
be
to
able
the
to get-
state bids we do for our squad car, our tires, our fleet trucks, our dozers. I mean, all the state bid items, once it's set, it's in place, and I don't think there's, I guess I'm not aware of any equation where we could go with a variable other than set and move forward from whatever date it is.
And we can't negotiate on our own.
Oh, we could, but when the state is coming in, the idea behind the state bid is they're looking at what they're gonna get for a resource or where they're gonna be supplying to. So it'd be me as a mom and pop store trying to sell soybeans versus Costco selling soybeans, and Costco can buy 5 truckloads and I can buy a pickup load. Who's gonna have the higher price? So we wouldn't, I don't think it'd be worth the time. We put a lot of time and effort in this on just chasing down what we could for the history and where we're at now. I wouldn't submit our staff to chasing it down, because I think it would literally be a lost path.
As a good example of that, Sourcewell does similar things to what the state's doing. They go out and contract. We found that the state always beats Sourcewell's pricing across the board.
Oh, cool.
The state has way more pull, way more power than we'll ever be able to have to negotiate to this pricing level even.
So I guess I would leave it, and I know there's a number of questions, and maybe we can find some more. We're on somewhat of a time constraint. We've got till February 1st. We're not there yet today, and I would certainly be willing to, all I'm looking for is guidance. We're gonna buy the quarter of them. It's already, been levied, been budgeted for. We've got that invoice ready. We are gonna send it in before that February 1st, so we don't end up on the new cost. Folks, my story is very simple. We need radios. We know we got to get on a replacements plan. I think the savings would be there, but it's just your comfort zone of where that money needs to go and what route we need to go.
Doug,
Yeah. Paul?
Doug, I've got a question. So Nick, you're saying that the American Rescue Plan money, the guidance that you've received, this would be an eligible expense for that money?
The guidance that Treasury released on the 6th does call out emergency radios now under I believe it's the public health section. The challenge we have is the ARPA meeting that's this morning. The Internal Work Group Committee has 8.33 million recommended already. We will have a conversation about the OSHA mandate that's coming forward at 10 o'clock here. There is the risk that will need to tap into ARPA funds to pull as well. So we may not have available ARPA funding without impacting all the other programs that are already drawing on that resource.
So then you got to explain that to me. Okay, so like give me some examples of what have we got earmarked already for that?
We
Are you
have the
talking
broad,
about like the daycare stuff and stuff like that, or are you talking just the stuff for the county?
nope, this is the daycare programs, the broadband, the water and sewer infrastructure, the child care aspect of it. All of our internal stuff is all included in that 8.3 that we'll discuss.
Have we committed? Are we committed to somebody for this child care and the other things that you just mentioned? Are we committed on that?
Not at this point. That is the 11 o'clock meeting with Commissioner Brecken and Mr. Chair to actually discuss what the next steps are for committing those funds and moving forward with spending them.
So, Paul, if I could add to that conversation, and that's kind of been the hard part, and this is why we end up this far into this process with a short window, is because of the guidance that we received for the ARPA funds. Another example, and Kara Terry's going to be bringing up, I guess, a little bit more in depth for me today, but I want to make sure you all hear it, was when ARPA funding first came out, we as SMT members and department heads with Tim Poole met and we said, okay, so we've got this money that we think's coming in. We didn't even know what the amount was going to be. What would we like to see it used for? And I continued this conversation up until yesterday. I said, well, one thing that I would like to see, I mean, if this was, say, free money that Scott could spend however he would want, I would like to see mental health professionals provided for every elementary, every middle school, and every high school, public school that we have in Crow Wing County. One or two additional mental health personnel in every building that we have, say, Crosby, Brainerd, and Pequot school districts, would go a long way. I said, I come from a teacher background and listening to their horror stories and looking at the mental health, I said, where would that be losing? We're looking at our future generation. It encompasses all of Crow Wing County population, from cities, the most rural township, et cetera, and the benefits, keeping them out of our jail, productive citizenship, a chance to move forward in life. I mean, I said, there's not a lose there. With the change of the ARPA, not to discount any of the work that everyone's already done up till now with the guidelines that we had up till now, my wish or my ask is that we revisit the idea of what are we going to spend that $10 million on? I mean, we had over, I think, $30 million worth of asks already, but now it's basically money that can be spent how we deem it in comparison to all the stipulations that were on it before. And I brought this up to the chiefs yesterday, and by a show of hands and a voice said, what do you guys think? I said, I'd like to speak for the entire, chiefs group from our area here. They said, wonderful idea. Yes, we'd love to see a program like that go. And I don't want to discount from all the work that's been done with the, with the daycares and everyone else submitting ideas, but now that the rules have changed, I think it'd be appropriate to reevaluate. Like Nick said, we're looking at $8.4 million of $10 million that we have. Well, the rules just changed, and are we best suited spending that there, or is there other ideas that could come in? Mine is among many ideas, I'm sure, that would come in if there was new guidance sent out to what we'd like to see.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, to Nick's point, we have $6 million to spend, I believe, in this first go-around, and $8 million in requests. I don't want to, I guess, tell these people that have spent the time to send their applications and stuff that we were just kidding, we're not going to fund that group.
But Doug, to go back to what Paul just mentioned was, the ARPA money is what's available. If this was my number one ticket item for ARPA, was $1 million. And I was very vocal from day one of this is $1 million. Now that the rules have changed, we're back at kind of square one of this being eligible for that $1 million.
And what I was going to finish saying is that I think it would be best for us to go through these applications that we are going today and then decide from there. But rather than recommitting the money, I'd just like to continue on with the process that we've set in place and then see what may be left, if any, and if it isn't this first go around, maybe it's the next one that we will have extra funds that we could consider doing something. So
that's not the route I'm sorry I cut you off. That's not. I thought you were going a different route. I should have held my tongue. Sorry I interrupted you. So yeah,
that's okay. I mean, I'm not sure what the others feel, but I guess I would just like to see the process at least go through today, where we could take a look at what we're, some of these maybe they're not realistic applications, and we can set them aside. But yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Doug. Yeah, I guess I haven't made up my mind yet, but I do agree with Doug. I think we should go and have the conversation. But I will say that I'm kind of leaning a different direction now. I guess here's what I look at a priority. I know that when you call 911 and you're having a heart attack or somebody's robbing you or whatever they're doing, obviously we want to make sure those people can respond. And I guess to me, having our sheriff's deputies have the proper radios versus some of these other things like wastewater treatment, or not wastewater treatment, what was it called again, Nick?
Sanitary sewer districts or the broadband?
Sanitary sewer districts. I don't know, in my mind, if I had to weigh out what has a higher priority, I think it would be the radios rather than the sewer districts. So I guess I'm starting to lean a little bit more towards the radios, but I still think that the county board needs to have a thorough discussion on this and figure out which direction we're gonna head. But that's kind of where I'm at right now.
And I think that's all part of that conversation that goes along with the ARPA eligibility and those projects and absolutely all that. I think from the standpoint of the radios, what you need to kind of decide today is which direction do you want to go? Replace them all now or stay on a more phased approach as to what you currently have? And then as far as where they get paid from, that can be figured out as part of the conversation with whether they get paid from ARPA, whether they get paid from fund balance, whatever it might be from that perspective as well. So whether we go to a lease situation, a purchase situation, whatever it might be, which direction would you like to go with the replacement schedule is kind of what we're looking for today.
Bill, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think I support staying on the plan that we have where we spread it out over that 5-year period and replace, budgeted $250 a year. I think as we look into the ARPA funds and we reevaluate that, maybe we'll see some change coming there, but until we get through that process, I'm in favor of staying with the plan we've got.
Mr. Chair, and I concur with that at this point. I think there is more information to be had, but at this point, I would support staying with the program that we currently have.
Could I maybe step back a bit and ask either Dan or John or whomever to say, what are we getting for $911,000? And what would it look like with the current plan of $250,000 the first year? And does that take care of our oldest radios and then we slowly replace the old radios? And I mean, what is all included in that?
Yes, Mr. Chair and board members. Dan's has it broken down here that $250,000 would replace just the portable radios for our road guys, correct, and gals?
Yeah, the total amount is actually, as far as the portables, there's a couple different types of portables. I can't speak to that, but I can tell you how much or how many we're actually looking at. We're looking at 99 of the XPX 6500s, which would be all the deputies' radios, special teams radios, miscellaneous radios as well too around the office and in the command trailers, as well as some cash radios as well too. And then we would have 30 portables, jail portables. Those are the XPX 4000s, which I do believe aren't as, there again.
They're not, they don't hold encryption into them. So the 6500s have encryption. And currently the way our radios are now, they're 12 years old because we purchased them all at the same time. We might have a dozen that we purchased about 5 years ago. But overall, all of our radios are from roughly 2012. And the current encryption that law enforcement has been using in the last year, we cannot put those into those radios because those radios are obsolete, like the sheriff talked about. Motorola does not support them anymore. Every once in a while we can get a vendor. Our vendor can repair its little things, but like he said, they're pretty much a paperweight if they break right now. So that's our concern, and then he talked about getting batteries. Last time we ordered batteries about a month ago. This summer we ordered batteries. I think it was around 20 of them. It took 2 to 3 months for us to get them. And my concern is if they're obsolete and Motorola is not supporting them anymore, is that I hope they don't stop making those batteries in the next 5 years.
Has anyone checked with that vendor to see if those batteries will continue to be?
They're really unsure as of right now because they're not supported from Motorola. They can't send them into the plant to get them repaired, and they can't get parts for them. So it's what they have on hand is inventory they're using to repair them as they get them, as they come in. But they've been really good radios for us, like we talked about. They're twice their lifespan they went through, and we've had very few issues with them. But when they do go down, we have had to retire a few of them.
Okay.
And then also, there's 68 mobiles that we would be replacing throughout our fleet, which includes, I do believe, the command trailers as well.
Command
too.
trailers.
As far as, I mean, if we would stay on the 250,000 per year, we would be looking at right away replacing all the deputy portables. And then any of those radios, we would basically be putting into a cache or, plug and play if there are other radios are going down, whether it be the jail or whoever we haven't replaced at that point. And then I think.
What's cash?
Go ahead.
What's cash mean?
Oh, the cache radios. Go ahead, John.
So we have cache radios now that we have in our command posts, and we have some in our dispatch center. So if we have a big event and we have, say, state patrol come in or outside agencies, we can hand them a radio that may not have the same programming as ours.
So what's the definition of cache? What is cache? Are you saying stash or cache?
Yeah,
cache?
yeah, it's
What's that?
basically a stock.
It's like a stock, like a little bit of a stockpile for if we had a big emergency. Yep.
Oh, okay.
So if we had a big
All right.
emergency, we could hand them out to volunteers, or leaders that were in our communities.
So Dan, did you say that for the 250,000, you could replace all of the portables?
The deputy portables, just the deputy portables.
So how many is that?
48.
48?
Yeah.
About half of.
Yeah, correct. And then from there, we would look at probably the jail portables and some of the mobiles with the next 250,000. And then from there, just looking at the rest of the mobiles as well as the special teams pieces of it.
So is it truly a 4-year cycle of 250,000, or is that got a little bit of some fluff in that?
No, I made $20,000. Right now, we're looking at $980,000, so.
Nothing, basically, okay.
I guess I don't have a problem with pushing this, folks, but just keep in mind, these are radios that are 12 years old now, and life expectancy of 6. We know they're not supported, and to think, to point out the obvious, it sounds like some have already made that dedication to it, but this is very old technology that 4 years from now is going to be ancient technology in my mind. We are accomplishing, and exactly, Doug, to kind of what you're speaking is, we're looking at our priorities of where we can plug in this system. I'm just not comfortable with, that long of a process to do it. We can certainly talk about it. Kicking the can till next year, which is we're good at, we've always done, and we can, continue the conversation then. We are building, our breakdown of exactly what we think is priority one. And this is for safety, like to mention to Paul's point, our deputies are the ones that are on the street, using them, but our biggest usage is in the jail. Constant communication between housing units, et cetera, booking, et cetera. And then we started looking at that, of prioritizing where they need to go. It's not an easy picture to say, oh yeah, these are way more important than these. We need them all. And just a 4-year cycle still sits hard with me.
Well, the problem with that is that we've already kicked the can down to 12 years.
Yeah, right, exactly.
We should have been back on this a couple of years ago saying, we have to have a plan here and saying, so that we can do this. Now it's,
Well, but
we're
if
trying
you
to
go back,
establish the plan.
okay, and that's fair, Bill, but go back 2 years. And where have I been for the last 2 years, hoping we'd have money for it? From the Arpa funds that we've had. So we've had 2 cycles of that already. And discussion points were brought up. Knowing that this is going to be a big item, it's $1 million. And, show me any recent budget where discussions of finding $1 million and spending $1 million. Now, I do like what we're moving into of having that replacement schedule more and more. But it was exactly that. It was internal and external of kicking the can was, unfortunately, I think we're very good at that of, bringing things 2 to 3 times their life expectancy simply because that's what we do.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So are all of those portables 12 years old? Or have we purchased?
Well, no, we've had some, it was so like John said, we've had some that when they were still able to be repaired and worked on, been repaired and some have been replaced, but this technology is, well, here's an example. St. Paul Fire, one of their fire districts, were trying to give away 150 or 120 of these radios. No one would take them. Literally, it's kind of, guys, I've got these radios, any small fire departments need them, anybody need them? It went on for months. I mean, it's, you know, anybody want these radios? We've got them here. That's the technology where it's at. It's yesterday's.
And maybe, Nick, I don't know if you can answer this, but I know back in the days of being on the fire department, there were always federal dollars, grants or whatnot that were available for purchase of equipment, radios or whatever. Is that an option as well?
On the fire department side, those are very competitive and very hard for the smaller departments to get access to. I don't know of any federal or state programs out there to really assist on this side either that would give us a full $1 million to buy the radios up front. I mean,
And I
we
guess
could maybe
I
get
wouldn't
some
expect
grants
the
that
full
would help
million,
us offset a little bit of cost, but I don't anticipate that unless Armor were to make significant changes or the 800 megahertz.
Well, my thoughts, again, are, I kind of piggyback off of Paul, and I think we need to go through this first process of the first go-around of the ARPA dollars and just see what comes out of that. And there are a couple of those items, I think, that radios are much more important than some of the thoughts we originally had as far as funding. So, from this point, I say we stay the course, but keep in mind that we know we have this $1 million bill and look for opportunities maybe to shave some costs out of the ARPA and apply towards this. So probably not what you want to hear, but I think we just owe it to ourselves to follow the, what we've started with the ARPA funds, and then we've got round two. So
The only thing, Doug, is Deb is kind of, to me, indicating that we have to make a decision, or she's wanting us to make a decision today, right now, on which direction we want to go.
With radios?
So I don't think we can.
The only
aren't you
reason
saying-
I mention that is because if you want to take advantage of the pricing that the current contract has, that contract expires February 1st. So if you wanted to be able to purchase all replacement radios to save that hypothetical $100,000 like we were talking about with the expected increase in what the contract pricing is going to be, you would want to make a decision. It doesn't have to be today, but within the next very short period of time, so that you could take advantage of that contract pricing that's going to expire at the beginning of February.
The only thing is, I think this is another one of those that I hearken back to Rosemary. I mean, Nick just sent this to me like a half an hour ago, this email, and I'm wanting, you're wanting me to make a $1 million decision like immediately, and I guess I'm not leaning the direction of Bill and Steve. I think that I would rather the radios in my mind take a higher priority over some of these other things that we've talked about. Can we have a discussion about that other stuff like Doug was talking about, and then can we make a decision before the end of the month on this? Not to kick it down the road, but
I think that's fair.
Yep.
Keep in mind too that the sheriff's office is purchasing 1/4 of these prior to that contract expiring. They already have that purchase order ready. They're going to submit that regardless of what this decision is. So 1/4 of that cost will already be saved in this first round. So if it takes you a little extra time, it might cost us a little extra, and if we use ARPA funds, it's $40,000, $50,000, $70,000 extra of ARPA funds that get dedicated to radios rather than some other program, but it allows us to buy them up front without using our local tax to cover that.
So we're only talking about, in addition to the 250,000 is what we'd be talking about if we would, do we want to increase that invoice or that order that would be placed? That's all we're talking about at this point.
Correct. It's that 3/4 that's remaining of that invoice.
So out of this 900,000, 250,000 is already
Committed.
in there, correct?
But assuming we don't make the decision fast enough and the next contract comes out, it's about 1/4 of what we have.
Yeah, the additional amount would be that 661,000 to come up to the 250, or to the 911, because if you subtract off the 250 from that, it's the 661,000 then.
Okay.
Well, and I think we'll have a better picture after today, and there should be no reason we couldn't get feedback to everybody, by the end of this contract. So maybe we take this from a 4-year replacement plan to 2 years or something along those lines. I think, that we can keep that in our mind as we move towards dispersing these ARPA funds, so.
And to Commissioner Coring's point, you could consider all your options and make a decision at your meeting on the 25th. You'd still be able to meet that deadline of what that contract pricing
Yeah.
would be if you were looking at increasing or including that extra $660-some thousand as part of that purchase.
Okay.
One last question. Having worked for the state of Minnesota, will they actually have a contract ready to go on February 1st?
No?
That's why it's, pricing is.
Short answer, I agree with Debbie, no.
The advantage we have is we actually know the expiration date of this contract. Many of the vehicles, they just all of a sudden go, nope, can't buy vehicles anymore, and the contract's done. So we at least know the end date.
Okay,
Doug, can I say one more thing?
sure.
This is to the sheriff. I don't want you to get the idea that moving forward, anything that comes forward that's law enforcement, don't think that I'm not going to be critical of it. I don't want you to think that, my God, it's law enforcement, we have to give it. I still have to we have to try to weigh out how we can pay for all this stuff. So I just don't want you to think I'm becoming a pushover for law enforcement. Does that make sense?
Well, I appreciate that comment, but no, I know that, and guys, like I said, I am in complete reality of, where we're working together, and this is it. I mean, my question is, and the reason, and what I told, when we started internally, John and Dan and I started this conversation, and what we wanted to move towards, I said, guys, we have to bring this forward to the county board, because we're looking at possibly six figure, we're looking at $100,000. And my due diligence is to do exactly this, is to bring it to the purse strings, if you will, and say, hey, where are we gonna, how are we best suited? Are we best suited to save the money, or no, we're gonna be able to save half the money, a quarter of the money, or money is better spent here. That's in your purview, I know that, and that's exactly why I brought it here. Paul, I love, if you were to be a pushover, it wouldn't be any fun, because I love the banter that you and I have, so yeah.
Well, I'm just glad that you're trying to work with us rather than coming and saying, this is for law enforcement, and if you're not for it, then you're not for law enforcement. Well, that's bullshit, because I'm for law enforcement, but the only thing is you can't, I don't know that we have enough money to pay for everything that we'd want.
Right.
So we try to do the best we can to provide you with the tools that you need to protect our community.
Yep, no, and I appreciate it. I will be comfortable with whatever. I wanted to make this it is a big deal to me, very important deal to me. But I also understand, the politics, not only the politics, but I say politics, and that has to do with the funding behind it, of all the asks that we've got. We've got 3 times the ask just for the ARPA money than the money that we have. So I'm a realist. I see that, and I appreciate. I think the messaging that I heard here today, where you want some time to digest it, but yet you recognize that we're facing a quick turnaround, I'm very appreciative of that, knowing that you're going to do your due diligence to come up with the best solution. So thank you, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're ready to move
All right.
on.
In the interest of time, knowing that we have a 10 o'clock and then 11 o'clock, do you have any questions on the financial status update that you would like to discuss? Would you like me to pull it up and do a quick run through?
I guess.
What would you like to see
Are
on
there
that?
any highlights
No.
that you can,
Realistically, the highlight is we had a pretty darn good year. You look at our revenues and our expenses, we did very well on revenues. We saw expenses under budget in many areas. and we do anticipate some decent fund balance growth across the entire group that will put us in a much better position for 2022 and hopefully outgoing years as well.
Good. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you do have any other questions, feel free to email me, call me. I'll gladly answer anything else you have.
Way to go on a good year last year. Thanks.
For additional business, you may have heard that final guidance did come out from Treasury. It is 437 pages of a lot of fluff and a little bit of detail. It did expand the use of funding much more broadly than it was in the original guidance. We do also have a standard allotment now for loss of revenue of 10 million. We have two options. We can either claim the 10 million or we can try and calculate it ourselves. In our calculation, we didn't show that we were going to have any loss of revenue over the course of the years based on the formula that Treasury had put together. So our best option is to take that full 10 million and use that as our standard allotment for loss of revenue. That does expand what we can use those funds for. Right now, guidance says it's for general government services. The interpretation that we're hearing so far from our auditors and from Treasury is that that is for your normal operations, is not to expand operations. The expansion and other items fall into the individual categories where you have to actually allot it to that particular area. So there's still a lot of research to be done. This did come out on the 6th. We did already attend Treasury meetings. We did attend our auditors' meetings. There is so much detail and so much information in this that it's going to take us a little bit of time to digest everything. But the biggest takeaway is it is much more expansive in what we can use. It'll be hard to say no to most of the projects at this point, not being able to qualify in some way, shape, or form. At 11 o'clock, we'll go through what came through in that initial piece. We did get over $21 million of requests in that first round. The internal work group has about 8.3 million worth of recommendations to that committee to move forward to the board at some point in time. We'll review that in more detail, and then we can have that conversation of what do we do with the remaining funds, how do we handle sheriff's office radios, those types of things in that committee, and bring that to the full board.
I do think as we review the ARPA requests that we have already, it will open the door for us to rethink and look maybe at a bigger picture with this too, with all the information we're starting to get.
Yep.
Yeah.
One other line or item that I added as well is we talked about the LIDs last month, and we had a few that were still open and trying to process to get them off of the Crow Wing County books and onto their own. The only one that we are still waiting for is CB Lake. They're currently waiting for their EIN from the federal government. Once they get their EIN, they'll be able to complete that process and push forward. Round Lake, Sibley, and Ruth all have their information into us and have either been settled out or the check will be coming out here shortly in the next couple weeks. So we're this close to getting all of the lids into their own account so they can manage their own funds and be aware of what they're doing.
Good.
Other than that, I don't have any additional items, but I do stand to answer any questions that you may have related to county finance.
You know, I had one thought, I guess not particular to radios, but, and maybe throughout all the departments, is if there are other big ticket items that we have maybe neglected to have a replacement plan in place, that would be something we should look at. I'm not sure what that threshold is of dollar-wise, but we could discuss those if we identified them, I guess. But this one definitely, I think, probably should have been similar to vehicles and stuff on some type of replacement plan, I think, going forward, but probably overlooked because we got them all at once and just didn't think about it enough, so. But
So, Mr. Chair, for clarity, you and Bill are meeting regarding the ARPA funds later today, this morning?
Yep.
Sometime?
Right.
So that is a piece of conversation that I think would be important to, you know, and I sounded strong in my position, but there's certainly other considerations, and if you come back with some other recommendations for the use of those dollars, and if it involves the radios, I'm certainly willing to look at that and consider that, but I think that's what I was trying to get at, is there's more points of information that I need to really figure out where we're going with this request. So just didn't want you to think, Sheriff, that, you know, I chiseled that in the rock and we're set there. There are considerations that might alter that thinking, so.
And we'll be having a board meeting before this contract expires, is that?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know if we bring it to that meeting at that time, or if we can get something out earlier, we'll discuss that as well. Perfect. Does that cover everything?
It's everything from me.
All right, well, I guess we will wrap up here and head downstairs.
Okay.